Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Babbling Irons. So it's just myself and Sloth here today. We don't have Frankie. Apparently, he's too young to remember most of these players. So it's just myself and Sloth in here today, talking about our ultimate 95 to present 11, but also detailing what you guys chose via the Twitter poll sometime last week. And now we're going to kind of run through and give our feedback on what we think was kind of, some misplays, missed names, and what choices actually came up. That it was quite an interesting poll, we feel. But without further ado, we'll just jump straight in and detail what you guys chose as your top 11. So in the poll, we obviously did across different kind of time periods at West Ham. And when we got to the finalists, these were our finalists for goalkeeper. So as you can see here, we had the big man, Ludo Miklosko, Rob Green, and obviously Lucas Fabianski all made it through into the final. I'm not going to reveal who the winners were. We're going to reveal that at the end when we see the actual 11. But this is, again, with the left-back position, we saw some big names in here. Obviously, Graham Cresswell from today, Julian Dix of old. Obviously, we had a leaner period in our history for left-backs. Which is kind of seen the likes of Konchesky and Matty Taylor as well. Right back, this was our final four. So it's a good mix in here. A couple that I really do like, and I think we'll be talking about in more detail in the actual show as well. Again, at right centre back was a bit of an oddball. There was maybe a couple I didn't see going the way it did, but ultimately this is the team that you guys have chose. These are your finalists. Again, with left back, no real surprises in here. Some really big names, and a captain during one of our worst periods of football with our financial crisis and so on. And then when we start getting to midfield, again, it starts to up in quality, I think, a bit around here. Again, we're seeing the lean period in Valon Baramin. Nothing against Barami. I thought he was good during his time, but it was dark times. Dark times indeed. And this is where I think we start to see, again, the quality ramp up. We start to see that we've had some good players throughout those years. Another good kind of final within here. Attacking midfield, some absolute beauties, I have to say, in this one. And then we start to look at our wide options. I think no matter where we go in this one, I think in the actual vote from our followers, plus with me and Sloth, it's going to be the same guy getting the nod.
Yeah.
Then at right wing, we've had some real quality in this position, especially two of them. Another one is a bit of a hero in the top right-hand corner for us all, I think. And then finally, I think this is probably going to be the most hotly contested and debated position. But again, we've had some real quality over the years. I guess the question has always been, have we really maximised what we had? So this is the team. This is what won the vote. So we have Ludek Miklosko in goal, Julian Dix, the Terminator at left back. We then have Rio Ferdinand and Kurt Zouma playing in our centre defensive pairing. And we have the man Soufal at right back. So as a defence goes, Sloth, what do you think of that? Do you agree with that? Or is that something we will talk about in more detail when we get to our piece?
I mean, to be honest, I think that's a very, very solid backline. Ludo, I'm not going to pretend to be a massive expert on it. When I think about Ludo, it's mostly down to highlights. Like I remember him being the goalkeeper for some of my very first games. But when you're a kid at that age, you to pretend to sit here and be like, yeah, he was amazing. Would BS everyone. Like I remember him being a giant of a man, and you would watch him. He just plucked crosses out the air. He was huge, and I think I can't really contest that decision in terms of merit because he was fantastic. But for me, it would be Rob Green because he was the keeper who, in my lifetime, like growing up as a football fan, I just think he was probably the best I've seen. And And yes, he had howlers. Like people are far too easy to remember those, but eager to remember those. Sorry, but I think when you talk about the best keeper West Ham have had in that kind of time frame, the standout for me is, I say to any sort of West Ham fan, what's the best goalkeeping performance, best individual goalkeeping performance you've seen from a West Ham keeper? And you get the odd shout here and there, and well, for me, I think it's hands down Rob Green against Arsenal.
Yeah, they weren't scoring in a month for Sundays. That game was incredible.
That attack was amazing. Like, it wasn't a crap Arsenal team. Like, if it had been like, a poor Arsenal team, we'd be like, yeah, okay, oh, it's a bit of, but some of the saves he made, some of the just acrobatics he showed to make them, I think on his day he was unbeatable, and I think he was a keeper who I kind of want to say he wasn't really, he doesn't get the recognition he deserves, because yes, he had those howlers and people really jump on them, but he was Brad Friedel levels of consistency for West Ham and for Norwich as well. When he was there, he was fantastic. Like, the guy should have had more England caps. He probably should have been brought in sooner. And in terms of that back line, that's probably the only one I can really say. For me, just because I'm slightly younger than young enough to not really remember Ludo, or not really fairly analyse him, then he would just be the one I change in that, I think.
So we'll come back to a defence, obviously, after this piece, and we'll obviously get into a bit more details to the other options that were available and on hand. But in midfield, you would argue that's a pretty solid midfield. It's a lot of the present over the past, which I do find slightly interesting. But we'll go into that in more detail as we go through. But you have a double pivot there of Rice and Parker. That's energy in abundance, if we're being honest. And then we have Joe Cole at the tip of that midfield, providing that kind of created play there. And I don't think it's a surprise who sits at left wing at all in the slightest. Yeah. Payet, arguably the best player we've seen at the club, probably in this entire period, I would argue. Then obviously got the man who's on fire at the moment, Gerrard. And then finally, the mercurial Paolo Di Canio. So that's the team that you guys have chose as our followers. It's a cracking team. We'll also put this up on Twitter afterwards to kind of show which team it is. But now, let's kind of go back and talk about as to, looking at the players that we've had over that years, kind of who we would kind of stick with and who would go with. So we've kind of already touched on McCloskey. I got him at the tail end of my time, much like you, Sloth. I always remember the guy being a giant of a man, imposing. Obviously, people always talk around the game against Man United, where we were obscene in the eyes of Alex Ferguson, and Ludek McCloskey was just basically had that Rob Green game against Arsenal, where no matter what came at him, it was getting saved, pushed away. Nothing was going in on that day. But look at the other guys we've had in that period. We also had David James, who came to us at a time where he was still known as Calamity James and was kind of essentially rebuilding himself and putting himself back together as a really good goalkeeper. And a player that I always remember and I always have a good fondness for, despite the FA Cup final where Gerrard smashed one past him, but Shaka Hislop. We've had some good goalkeepers over the years. Even Jussi Laskalainen was a great player for Allardyce. But I'm I lean to McCloskey because I think it's my early years. But I think for me, if you were to say that Rob Green was your man, I would probably go with that because he was probably the most consistent goalkeeper we've had for a period. Obviously, the international honours. He also came down with us when he could have easily left and was brilliant that season. And then when we came back up again, he was just incredible for us for that entire period he's at the club. And he always talks fondly about West Ham. So I've always got a bit of a soft spot for Green because it's just one of those goalkeepers that just was always there for us. And let's face it, Hammer of the Year, we can't ignore that as well. To get Hammer of the Year as a goalkeeper, one, probably shows you for a really bad defence, but two, what an achievement, because he's clearly done incredible stuff for us over the course of a year.
Yeah, I think let me be clear. The only reason it's Rob Green over Ludo, in case anyone wants to kick off, is just because I'm too young to can't sit and pretend that I'm going to give expert analysis on Ludo, because I can't. But I think he was on his day a brick wall, and I think just as importantly, he was a figurehead. He was someone you could rely on to kind of just keep his cool and do things the right way. If there was someone who was vocal in the dressing room, by all accounts, it was him. He was kind of, geeing the lads up and trying to either cool the heads of guys or just kind of get people focused. So I think he's a kind of figurehead for consistency when I think of that kind of goalkeeping era where let's face it, we had a few howlers and we had difficult times. I mean, it's interesting because the general consensus is that I've managed so well to get his name out my head and to forget the calamities he showed at the Olympic Stadium, that he who shall not be mentioned, I can't even remember his name now.
I think we all know it's the Spanish clown.
We won't talk about it because it's gone from my head. It doesn't need to come back. But when I was growing up, it was very much a case of who's in goal today, and that could very much be getting shaky before the game if it was the wrong name. But when Green was there, when we had that run of Green, Hislop, and Jaskalainen, like it began to get a bit more. It
felt a solid base, and it always felt reliable. Xhaka for me was always a brilliant shot stopper. I always remembered Shaq. So I have fond memories because it was a period where I was getting into football a lot more. So I think I always have a fondness for Shaq because it's great nostalgia for me.
Yeah.
But I would go with, if we're going to say who our goalkeeper is, I think from our time, the ones that we remember most fondly is probably, I think we're going to say it's Rob Green, right? We're going to put that out as our main man. So there you go. That's our first name named in our team. So we've gone against the vote. So apologies to all those that voted for McCloskey. We do have much love for McCloskey. He was my first goalkeeper I remember watching, but I remember Green so fondly and always felt so comfortable with Rob Green. So he's our man between the sticks.
Let's also mention the best song in football, without a doubt. The Ludo song is incredible.
It is an incredible song. We've not brought out another song for a goalkeeper. So it also is a testament to how fondly liked he was, I think. That he also got his own song, which is something that I've not known a goalkeeper to get since. So we're now down our goalkeeper. It's time to move on to the fullbacks. So I guess the question really is, are you more of a traditionalist on a fullback? Are you looking for someone who's going to defend first and put their heart on the sleeve and be a defensive fulcrum? Or are you looking for that more modern day expressive one? So I guess let's start at right back first. We've had quite a few right backs over the years. So let's start there. So Sloth, let's some of the right backs over the years that you've kind of taken to. Who do you feel worth a mention as part of this potential ultimate team for Babylon Irons?
I mean, the one who stands out to me, and I would say he'd be very much level pegging with Soufal, it's Lucas Neal. And I know he wasn't the kind of swashbuckling right back that we see these days, but he got forward when he needed to. And one thing with Lucas Neal was he was a big man. He was a strong man as well. And if he was in a 50-50 with a player, I generally knew, like, it was one of those things where, you know, he's not getting shaken off the ball. He's not getting, you know, just shrugged off or put to one side easily. And if he is getting out-muscled, he's taking the man down with him. He was a master of the dark arts in terms of just making a fall look like it was a fall instead of he's grabbed the shorts and pulled him down, or he's just taken a bit of the
a rugby tap tackle in there as well. Yeah,
the good old fashioned rugby six tackle. It's like but he was solid, dependable, and I mentioned it with Rob Green, but he was a leader as well. I mean, he was captain, and he was someone who, when he was on the pitch, you could hear him. I remember going when I'd be at the Old Berlin, and you would hear Lucas Neal. You would hear him shouting orders, and you would hear him from the stands, and that's something that I think. Pardon me. That people tend to forget, or maybe don't realize. Well, we've lost it somewhat at the Olympic Stadium. You can't hear the orders. You can't hear the players talking as much. But when we were at the Berlin, you could hear right on top. You were right.
He was right on top. Especially the chicken run was always the funny one, just to be right on top of that. But I agree. You know, Lucas Neal was, he was a true captain, a proper captain. And we've had some good captains over the years, but, you know, I always put him as one of those that are up there. I always remember when you hear players talking about that time, because there were some difficult periods as well at that point.
Yeah.
And Lucas Neal talks about as a leader of men. He got players going. And as you say, it wasn't swashbuckling. He wouldn't kind of rampage forward, but he gave you everything. You know, he left that pitch and you always felt like he'd given everything he could. And even if he wasn't having a good game, he made sure everyone else was playing to his standard, which, you know, is an amazing thing to have that much about you, to know that, I might not be playing well, but it does not mean that any of you can drop. And, you know, I always like that about Neil. You know, before that, you know, you had Stevie Potts, who Ian agrees about Stevie Potts. You know, one of our longest serving players and you know, most caps as well. So deserves obviously a very good honourable mention. You know, we had Glenn Johnson during that period as well of that. When was that? In the kind of 2003, 2009 period where we had Lucas Neal, Glenn Johnson, but we also had some lean years with Johnny Panstill and Julian Faubert. So, you know, we've had in that period, we had some quality players. You know, before that, Bertie Schemmel was another one. Hammer of the year, was a quality player for a good season or so before it all kind of moved away. But I think it'd be remiss if we don't talk about, you know, our fullback of this era, as in Vladimir Coufal. I think, you know, I personally would go with the vote for Coufal. You know, I absolutely loved Lucas Neal. We were looking for a captain, and there were no other options, you know, within what we have, because I think we do have a couple of captain candidates. So I'm going to step away from Neil and actually put forward Coufal as the main man for our team, just because I think the way he came into the club and how he's played through injury as well at one period, but how he's been when he's been fully fit has just been a revelation for us at right back. It's really shown us as to what a right back can be. So I'm going to park tradition and not go for the fully defensive guy or the leader at the back, such as Lucas Neal, and I'm actually looking at the more modern day, in my view. I like a fullback that can attack and can get crosses in. Maybe it's because of just watching too much Barcelona and Dani Alves that's resonated as what a fullback now is. But I'm going to put forward Coufal. So, what are you going for, Sloth? Who's your man?
I'm going to agree. I think he as soon as he came in, he absolutely nailed on that position.
Yeah.
And for me, he's deceptively quick. He's not like rapid, but he's quick. And he will give you 100%. It's the same sort of mentality as Lucas Neal. He might not be the same sort of vocal leader, but you know he's going to give 100%. And as we said, like, one thing I'll say for Soufal is, because some people might be going, "Oh, how can you do that?" But people are more than happy to forget how good he was in that first season and call it a one-season wonder, as opposed to say another fullback we could mention called Cresswell. You know, Cresswell hasn't been fantastic, hasn't been at that level that Soufal was for a good 3 years. And yet people will say, "Oh, but he was fantastic for this season. He was fantastic." Oh, and what about when he should have been an England left back? Well, that's fine. But if you're going to treat one player with that merit, you have to treat another one with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for me, Soufal has that same level of ability that Cresswell does. He might not have fancy set pieces, and you know, he might not be able to deliver a cross to the same degree. But if you give him 5 chances, generally one of those is going to be a goal. Like,
I think his first season, only Cresswell and Trent Alexander-Arnold out-assisted him. And Cresswell did that with set pieces, as did Trent. So to do that in your first year in the Premier League is an incredible feat, when you were signed from a league that people would call a farmers league, signed for £5 million, completely unknown, and to come in as he did, it's just incredible, in my opinion. I think he deserves a title for our ultimate right back, I think.
Yeah, I think as well, it's just we're too eager to kind of throw away players performances that don't match the same kind of level we know they can give. And there seems to be a lot of selective
memories,
particularly when you question other players who could be accused of that. But for me, I think Soufal, if we keep Soufal, there's at least another 4 or 5 seasons there where we can get a really good right back in. If he heals up from his hernia, if he's all healed up from that and gets full pre-season under his belt, I have no doubt we'll see the Soufal we did in the first season.
Agree. Yeah, and I think also what a mentor to have to the young Glenn Johnson and Ashby as well. So cool. We're going to say our right back is Soufal. I think we're unanimous in that one. And let's move on to left back. So you've already brought up one of them that's there. We've had a number of left backs over the years, but probably really only 2 that are worth talking about. We'll start off first with Cresswell, and then we'll go on to who I think, without a shadow of doubt or question, will be our left back, and the one that we will talk about as captain, as part of this squad. But first off, let's talk about Aaron Cresswell. So he's been at the club for nearly 8 years now. Obviously had quite a substantial injury during that period. And in that period, in the farewell Boleyn year, had a great season alongside, obviously, Dimitri Payet. And season 4 last, again, was right up there with assists, with quality set pieces and so on. So it's been a bit of I always find Cresswell was a bit of a mixed bag for me. I liked him prior to his injury. Since his injury, I think over seasons he's been too inconsistent. But again, when we look at the other left backs we've had during our history, there has been a level of consistency that we have to kind of hold our hands up to and say he's been a good servant and he's been a good player for us in that role. But my vote, personally, is not going to be for Cresswell. My vote is going to be for the Terminator himself, Julian Dix. When I think of a player that epitomises what West Ham was in a certain period, he was that. It was that never give up, never die kind of attitude, would throw himself into everything. And I mean literally everything. And I always remember someone talking to him about Ronaldo and him saying about, how would you deal with Ronaldo? Do you think it'd be really difficult to deal with? And his response clearly was a quite simple no. And when they looked quite, kind of quizzical at him, his response was, look, he will come over to me, we'll do some step overs. He may go past me once, but the next time I'm putting him in Rose Ed and he's not coming near me again. And that was Julian Dix. It was, That's fine. You may beat me once or twice, but I will, when I get a chance, I'm going to snap into a tackle. Hard, but fair. I'm going to snap into one and I'm going to make you know that I'm going to be here all day and this is what's going to keep happening. So he's my man. I'll actually give one honourable mention. Stuart Pearce, he was another hard man that we had. Broke his leg and then tried to play football. Pretty sure a few weeks later. Yeah. And he was, that period where we did have a couple of hard left backs in, Dix, and then we had Pearce. But for me, the Terminator, I think, is probably slightly nostalgia as well. But he was a player. He would thunder a penalty, score a long range shot. He could take a good free kick. He was just everything I think fans wanted in a player. It was just pure and utter embodiment of just grit, determination, and just giving everything for the shirt. So he's my man. I'm quite happy to debate any other player, but as far as I'm concerned, it's Julian Dix all the way.
No, I completely agree with you, really, because I think, as I said with Ludo, like he was kind of right at the beginning of when I supported West Ham. However, as I started to play football, I remember my dad he managed to get just a few like video types of match he'd recorded and stuff. We used to have this huge VCR collection of like matches he'd recorded, and he would just put them on and be like, if you want to be a left back, which was because I'm left footed as well, where I played, he'd pop them on, be like, watch this, and he would give you 100%. And it was back when the club would still do highlight tapes, and he would put some of those on, and they'd show like a Julian Dix highlight reel, and as you said, he would. The thing I remember about him is he would fly into tackles, but I never like. There were a few times where you'd go, yeah. Well, that's like he's very lucky to get away with that. And yeah, in today's game, he would not be on the pitch for a lot of those tackles. However, saying that is doing a disservice to the level of player that he was, because he would know that. Do you really think he's not going to adapt his game in some way today for that? He was. People forget he was actually quite quick. He was quick, and I think it was even he'll say, where was it? He broke his leg or his ankle. What was it? The big injury he had.
He had his knee problems in it. And I think it was his
knee
ankle
problems. And he didn't have the same level of pace after, so he had to adapt his game. So we know he's got that in his locker, but he was quite quick before his big injury, and to his kind of furtherment as well, he had a wonderful left foot.
Yeah, I think if you used to say Alan Partridge, he had a foot like a traction engine.
Yeah, go.
Exactly. When he unleashed it with that left foot, that ball was forever struck. I think it's the polite way of putting it. For me, he kind of was the precursor to a modern fullback, where he gave the challenges, and he would, give the studs up kind of 9 times out of 10, and he'd fly into the challenge, but he'd beat a man, or he'd give you the overlap, and he'd give you the ability to cross. So yeah, no arguments from me with that. I think Dix is a really funny player to talk about, because when you mention him, a lot of people go,
or he wouldn't make it in today's game. And I think that's doing him a disservice. I think anyone who watched him would say he definitely would. He'd have to change his game, but essentially he wouldn't have the injury problem.
And he did adapt as well because he moved to left centre back as well. So he had it in him. And then we had a player, I think, in him, and I think that probably talk about centre backs. Time we move forward into what we would like from our centre back. So obviously every team you build from the back. So we've already got our goalkeeper, we've got our flanks. So now who do we go for centre back? We've had in this period some real big names. We've also had some come for our youth. Obviously the tail end we had Alvin Martin, who's an absolute legend at West Ham. So I always remember him. But obviously he was in his latter years at that point, with the likes of Rio Ferdinand coming through, who was a incredible talent. We can never forget that, although that what's happened in the past since then. He was an insanely good talent for West Ham and was incredibly graceful. When we also then look around at the likes of Thomas Repka, who is an absolute chaos, an absolute mess. We've had defenders of all different types at the club. Some that I've been remembered very fondly, some who have just kind of passed us by now as players that remember from kind of yesteryear. But who would you say is kind of your standouts during your time as a Sporting West Ham as a centre back? Who would you kind of say that should be in that conversation for the kind of top position?
I do think Ferdinand's the easy choice to pick for that, but that's almost kind of it's doing him a bit of a favour because he wasn't nearly the player that he became. He wasn't the player that he developed into at Leeds or Man United. And I think it's quite easy to just automatically pick him. And while ultimately, I think if we're talking about Ultimate 11, we're talking about the best players at their best, then he undoubtedly walks into it because he was a sensational centre back. He could easily make it in today's game. That's kind of how good he was. But I do think it's it's also just worth mentioning players like Upson, who were, they weren't the quickest. Upson was deceptively kind of quick, but he read the game so well.
Yeah, and he held the fort as well in a period that was really dark for the club.
Yeah.
Forever having a centre-back changing, the likes, I think, of DaCosta. I think even James Collins was in and out of that team at that period as well. In his first stint, he probably, he got his captain's armband to keep him there because we were in dire straits in that time. And, as you say, he definitely deserves a mention. He didn't get maybe that many of the votes in the actual overall poll, but he's certainly a player who deserves, he definitely deserves a mention because he did us a good job in a period where not many players did, if we're being really honest.
I think it's always an interesting one for me to see the love that Collins gets as to Upson, and I don't mean this in any disrespect to Collins, but Upson was a better centre back. There's no disagreement about that. He was a better centre back in almost every measure. He was better on the ball. He could pass really well. That was a deceptive part of his game. He could ping a 30-40 yard pass. But he read the game well and he was a leader. And we had that team was turgid. That back line was turgid, but you could always depend on him to give you at least a 6.5 at 10. And that might not sound amazing, but when you think of who he was playing with, that's a feat. To get a 6.5, he was a great player. And as well, he was offensively from corners. He was just one of those who once he got going, once he got up in the air, you were not stopping him.
Yeah, and you can't forget he got in the England squad whilst at West Ham in a team that was, quite frankly, let's be honest, it was keep saying it, a bad period for West Ham fans, but it was all the financial problems, all of the other off the field craziness that was going on during those periods and during that time. He was one of those standout players, along with someone else we were guaranteed to mention in a moment. But he was so strong for us in defence. And again, he became our captain. Probably should have been our captain, but we gave him the captain's armband to keep him at the club, which again, you can understand the thought process behind it. But he did give us a lot. As you say, he was great for us in especially set pieces when we almost all we had in games was a set piece. And again, left footer. How rare is it to see a left-footed, left-sided centre back as well? And it was no mean feat for him to get in the England squad at that period, especially whilst playing for such a poor club as we were back then. And I guess we kind of need to talk around another centre-back who's played a lot of the left-hand side and the right-hand side, and one that we'd all agree when he was given a contract probably wasn't the smartest one to do. But again, it's a player that I'll always remember fondly in Winston Reid. When he signed for us, kind of played a bit of right back, played a bit of centre back. First season, I think we were all thinking, what have we done in signing this player? And then obviously after that relegation, it seemed to be the making of him. And from then on, he was everything about our defence, I think, Winston Reid. And one of those moments that I think going to live long in everyone's memory is going to be the Fairway Bowling game with that incredible leap and then header and the commentary that goes with it. Stunning piece of stunning game. I always feel that if we're going to talk about centre backs at West Ham, obviously, I think, as you say, Rio is a bit of a given, but it's also an easy given because of what happened. But there have been other players that, if we're talking about specifically their period at West Ham, you'd have to say that Winston Reid has been one of those players and one of those centre-backs that it's hard to look past. Probably going to, because I do think if we're talking about a left-sided centre-back, I would sway for Rio. But I do think someone like Winston deserves a good honourable mention because he was so much about our club and could have easily gone to a club like Arsenal. There was interest in the time and he stayed with us. Fortunately, injuries has scuppered his career for us and scuppered his career in general towards the end. But someone that I hold quite favourably. I don't know about yourself, but how you feel about Winston Reid, whether you think his inclusion in the final round was where he should have been.
I think it's easy with Winston Reid to forget that we signed him when he was very young. We plucked him from obscurity, and that's no disrespect at all. Mm-hmm. I mean that with no disrespect.
It's FC Midtjylland, I think we signed him from in Denmark.
Yep, and he was shaky. Let's make no bones about it. When he first joined and played, he was very shaky. However, what a player he developed into. He was a man mountain on his day, and we mentioned injuries, and I think he's one of those players who, had he not gotten quite the amount of injuries that he did, I think he would have really pushed on. And I think he probably would have left us for a bigger club. He was that good. And, giving him the contract that we did, I feel it's soured his reputation with a lot of fans, and particularly myself. I just thought it was terrible business. Now, does that mean I think he's a terrible player? No, not in any way, shape, or form. I love the guy, and it was about the kind of period where I was going to games, but also I was meeting players, and you'd meet them after, or you'd go to the season ticket holder events kind of thing, and you'd meet the captains, and generally Noble was there, that kind of. But you'd meet players, and he was always so positive and so friendly and just professional. He came across really, really well, and again, by all accounts, he was that same way on the pitch, in the tunnel, in the dressing room. I think he's another one you could hear him shouting. And do I think he's the best centre back we've ever had, like, or in this period. No, like, look, he's given me the best memory.
Yeah,
out of
exactly
those.
where I am with him as well.
Yeah, he's given me the best memory, without a shadow of a doubt. You could even argue 2 with his goal against Millwall, but
yeah, I remember I was there for that game as well. That was a great game, that one.
but he, yeah, I think that just unfortunately for him, those injuries, they'd not only changed how he played, but they had a huge effect. Yeah. And it's something that you can't really avoid when you talk about him. So while I
did sour it, yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah, while I think he was a fantastic player, and people forget he was rapid when he joined. He was very quick, but also with his frame, he could easily have been one of those players who was getting 5 goals plus from centre back. Just with the way we played, he'd just throw himself at stuff. But he just couldn't get the time on the pitch, unfortunately. So I it's regrettable, but he wouldn't make my final cut. But he made the bench for the.
So if you was naming your West Ham 11 left-sided centre back, would you be naming Rio? Or would you be putting someone else forward?
My head says Rio, because obviously the player that he became, you have to put that player in there. But my heart probably says an injury-free Reed is one that I'd really love. So I'm going to be sensible and avoid the kind of furor that I could get. So I'm going to say Rio, but I do think had we got an injury-free Reed, I think it would be a closer conversation, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So I'm going to go with Rio as well. Like you pointed out, one of my greatest memories from a West Ham centre back, in particular, is always going to be Winston Reid. I was there at the game, and there's just so many things about that game that will always, I think, resonate for a lot of fans. And that goal, it couldn't have happened probably to a nicer player, to be honest.
Yeah.
And he's going to be forever etched into our history for that one moment alone. And that, I think, is a great thing. And I think that's probably going to be worth more to him than ever being named in the top 11 from fans or whatever. I think that in itself will always be something for him. So, yeah, I'm going to go with you with Rio as well.
One of the big that I don't mind him getting that big contract is just because he seemed like such a nice guy. I'm just like, yeah, go on, give him his retirement.
Exactly. I think had it not been for the injuries, I think he would be talked about far more fondly than, say, the likes of James Collins, who I'd always thought was a good player, but I always thought really overhyped, which was when I think that was reflected in the result as well. He lost by 1% to Kurt Zouma as the right-sided centre-back choice. For me, when I think about the centre-backs, I do think Kurt Zouma is the best right-sided centre-back. I don't think we probably need to debate that because we've spent a lot of time on others. But I think James Collins was always a good player. I agree the way he left, I think it's maybe also helped that feeling of always rooting for him and talking around him. And he's always been really good about the club. So, everyone loves Big Ginge. He was a character. He's a great guy. Personally, never fed into how amazing he was as a centre-back as to how I think some have put him, to put him so highly or so close to, say, Kurt Zouma. I think that's more a combination of things that puts him there. But I'm going to say Kurt Zouma as well for the right-sided centre-back. Yeah. How about you? You agree with that? Or are we going to disagree on Kurt? Minus the cat kicking, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, I mean, I do find that a real sour note, and I know that on Twitter these days you can't be seen to say I don't agree with that. You can't be seen to say actually that's unacceptable. And for my point of view was get him away. I don't want that at the club. You know, that's my point of view. I'm going to stand by that. You know, I don't support him at all, really.
I'm going to throw you a curveball here, Sloth.
Yeah.
I always to say that because he played on both sides, Winston Reid as our right-sided centre-back to go alongside Rio, would that be getting you a nod?
Yeah, go on then. Yeah.
Because I'm quite happy to go with that, because I think Winston Reid played on both sides defence for us throughout his time. And I think for that last game and for the way he developed from when he arrived to the player he was prior to him basically not being able to come back and then being ushered out the back door after 10 years, that left a bit of a sour note for me, because he did reach 10 years for West Ham. Maybe didn't play all those years because of injury, but he was there 10 years and was never given a testimonial like other players have. So that always kind of soured a little bit for me how the club treated him. But I think personally, when we're talking about best centre-backs, they're probably two of our most consistent. We go Rio and Reid. So yeah, we're going to throw a curveball in there against the vote. And
I'm clutching onto that life raft like you wouldn't believe. So yeah,
exactly.
It's a bit of a sour one for me. And you know, comments can call me what they like. But I think in terms of football ability, let's not get it twisted. He's a fantastic centre back. He's got all the potentials to be a great, and you know, he's got his punishment. He's got to move forward and live with that. And he's been fined by the club. Cool. Doesn't mean I have to like it, but it you know, for me now, if he goes forward and he does things the right way, maybe in a few years it'll be a bit closer. But for me, I think Reid's always going to be that centre back that I love.
So I think we've got our back five sorted now. So we've got our goalkeeper. We're saying is Rob Green, left back, the Terminator himself, Julian Dix. Then we're going to go for a bit of guard and a bit of class in Rio, just an out and out defender, bit of a brick wall in Winston Reid. Right back, we're going for Soufal to have a bit more of that kind of modern day fullback. So I guess now this is probably where I think we're going to have one of the most contested views now, because centre midfield, we have developed arguably three of the best English midfielders in the last couple of decades. I don't think that's unfair to say in the development of Michael Carrick, Frank Lampard, and also Declan Rice, we have produced three of the best midfielders probably in the last 20 years in England. Obviously, this is going to be contested by other people. They are going to disagree with that, but whatever way you look at it, they were England internationals. Two of those went on to win Champions League, Premier League titles, and have a litany of honours against their names. So I don't think you can dispute that. Those two in particular were incredible talents. And what surprised me in the poll was how little or how far ahead it was in the voting when it came to the period where we were talking around, say, Michael Carrick. Obviously, he won his vote in terms of his time period, but when you got into the final, obviously we had that final was between Declan Rice, Mark Noble, Rio Coker, because obviously it was over those time bands and those time periods. Obviously, Declan got 80%, and whilst I love Declan Rice, for me to have Michael Carrick only getting 6.8% of the vote and actually losing to Mark Noble in the vote is sheer lunacy. I love Mark Noble, I love Declan Rice, but in a vote where those two are so clear of Michael Carrick dumbfounds me, because when Carrick came through, he was at that period. Obviously, we had all of those lads coming through. They were like 18, given a chance, but at 18, he was what looked like, or near enough, a complete player. He was so good on the ball. Rolls Royce is the ultimate compliment. He always had time, even if he had none. He just had time. But what a player he was. And obviously, when we look at other players we've had as well, Frank Lampard, say what you will about him personally and then what happened after he left the club, but when he was at West Ham, he was a goal machine. Went on to continue to do that and take it to a new level when he went on to Chelsea. Again, he was another player that was so good and was again absolutely clobbered by Scott Parker. Which again, I understand there's a lot of sentiment about Parker, and he was the captain that wasn't the captain during a very intense period at our club, which I think also is probably why, when you look at those two in particular, why when that vote, why that one wasn't so close, because one resonates with a period which was dire, and it was a player who, much like us as fans, was wanted to fight and give everything for the club. So I think it helped him in that kind of thing, because also personality came in. But yeah, we've had so many good midfielders. So what do you think? Who are yours?
For me, I think, I couldn't believe the Carrick, the landslide by which Carrick was bested, I think is the right way to put it. Yeah, nothing against any of the players in that list, but I just think Michael Carrick is a footballer who will make it at any club, at any point in time. He's that good. He could play today, and if we had a player like Michael Carrick in a 3 with Souček, Rice, that's an unbelievable 3. He was a player who could pick passes, like he was doing his laces. It was easy it was effortless, and it was the thing that always really impressed me, and I mentioned it a couple of times, I think, with Rice, is just how he did that slight lean, and he just fake, and that fake would give you suddenly 3 yards of space, and he just play the pass easily. He wouldn't even need to look half the time. He'd just play the ball, and he knew someone was going to be there. He knew someone was going to be running onto it. Michael Carrick was a fantastic footballer. Parker, again, he was an absolute machine. He could do the passing, he could do the tackling, he could do the engine room work. But when I've got Declan Rice next to you, we look at Rice and Souček these days and we go, well, one of them needs to sit. Well, you're going to have exactly the same problem if you have Parker next to him. You're going to need someone to be that slightly further back, slight kind of, big Rolls Royce parked in front of
mediator in the middle. Yeah.
If you want your defensive back line, like just full of big units and tanks, well, he's going to be a Rolls Royce sat in front of that, and he's just going to sweep everything up. And one thing about Michael Carrick was he didn't have to tackle. When he did, he tackled well. He wasn't like a Paul Scholes where he just throw himself into something. He tackled well, but the amount of times you'd watch him and he'd just move into space, and he would immediately close channels for the opposition by moving into space.
Just put a toe out, nick the ball, and it was just that was his way of tackling. Yeah, he was so intelligent. That's the best way of putting it. It's just an intelligent footballer. Didn't get as many England caps as he should have as well. It's one of those players you just look at and go, that it just misused. Another misused player during a golden age of players that came through.
And Frank Lampard's one of those who I think when you talk about the player that he became, then you kind of almost have to select, a bit like Rio, where you have to acknowledge the quality that he became. He would very much get in a 3 for me with Rice, Carrick, and Lampard. I think that 3 is unplayable on its day. That is a fantastic setup.
So this will lead me to my question. So we obviously also have to acknowledge what formation we want to play. So we obviously, when we did the vote, we did it on the idea that it isn't a double pivot, but this is our show, so we can play around with it a bit.
Yeah.
So let's do that. So I think then, I think that we're both going to agree that we want to play a 3-man in midfield. So we want to have some flexibility up front. So I think in that case, we have to then talk around as to some of the attacking midfielders' quality and whether they deserve a call as to potentially breaking into that. So, when we talk around the likes of, I include him on the wingers mainly because I forgot him and then felt very stupid afterwards, which was the Israeli magician that was Eyal Berkovic. We've also had Yoshi Benayoun, again, another just incredibly technical, beautiful player. Joe Cole as well. Even Kevin Nolan, the goal-scoring machine that was Kevin Nolan. Not necessarily your sexier kind of attacking midfielder, but he was incredibly functional and good within the right setup. Obviously, we have Manu recently as well, who was part of the vote and got obviously to the final. So for me, of those, the ones that I would say would potentially have a shout of breaking that free that you've mentioned, which I actually wholeheartedly will say I am with, is Joe Cole, because of when he came through, the trickery and the way he could just break teams down was incredible. He was an insanely good talent when he came through, and had so much freedom to express himself. He was just a joy to watch prior to leaving West Ham, where he became I think a little bit more functional. Some of the fun was taken out of Joe Cole, but what a player he was though at West Ham when he came through.
I mean, I still talk about one of the first games I remember seeing him at was a pre-season game, and he did a rainbow flick over someone, and then another player came, he just tapped it over them as well, and I'd never seen anything like it. And you could just see players like, especially from an English player, but at West Ham, I'd never seen anything like it. And even my dad went, he used an expletive, and he looked at me and said, "Don't tell your mum."
I never said that.
Yeah, and I was just like, wow, he could do things with the football that I don't think anyone we've had since Payet could do.
He closest English player to Gaza there's been since probably, I guess you'd say maybe like Grealish in recent times, as to that I can pick up the ball and run. But
even Grealish, I think it's a hard one, because Grealish has been incredibly lucky that his fitness is what it is. And the guy clearly takes care of himself. I don't give credence to any of the stuff about him. He can do what he wants in terms of
exactly. It's his time off. He can go and have a drink. It's okay.
But when you've got calves the size of a human head, it's not really. I don't really think we can question his overall fitness. But for me, Joe Cole. When you talk about Joe Cole, it's also another what could have been, and I do think those injuries changed the way he played, and to his credit, the way he adapted to them and the player that he became, as you said, a lot more kind of refined, a lot more of a skill, but possession based, and less kind of nipping past his man, but
it was less flash, I think.
It
became. I always found it interesting that he talked around that people would often say to him, or the comment often put to him was that he never fulfilled his potential. But then, and his rebuttal, I think, is quite telling as to how we value or how we see, or even maybe just how we just imagine and try and make this kind of fantasy of what a player could be or what their potential is. But his rebuttal was, I went on to win Champions League, went on to win titles. I have medals. So to say I didn't achieve, it's like maybe the only thing I never achieved was winning a title with my nation. But in my career, actually, I set out to do. I achieved everything I wanted to. So say I didn't reach my potential, maybe the way we're judging what potential is, or what we had an idea of what he would become as a player, are maybe not as set in reality, or maybe we even underappreciate actually what he did do.
I think that is part of it, but I'm speaking from a place where I just think there was a little bit more in there, but it's mainly based down to that injury. If he hadn't have got that injury, I think you're seeing Joe Cole. You know, he won titles, but let's not get it twisted. He faded really towards the back end of his career, and I think if he doesn't have that injury, he doesn't fade in that same degree. So it's nothing in terms of saying, oh, what he won is taken away. It's not subtracting from that at all, because he was an ultimate professional, and you know, you only have to listen to kind of how highly Mourinho rated him, and you know, he was a player who at West Ham everyone thought, oh, he can do a Rabona, like, oh, whereas Mourinho looked at him and thought, actually, I can rely on him. I can get him to perform. I know he's going to give 100%. And this is someone that I want around. This is someone with a winning mentality.
I think with Mourinho, he refined him in the sense that he told him to be flash only in the moments when he needed to, rather than always trying to do something extravagant to entertain. It's ultimately it's about winning. It's not about necessarily entertaining. And I think that's what he changed out of Joe Cole, which was obviously for the better for his career. So let's get that right. It was for the better of his career. I think Redknapp, rightly or wrongly, indulged the flamboyance. And I think that's why I always remember Joe Cole so fondly, especially in his first time at West Ham, because he was just that player who, when he got on the ball, you went to the edge of your seat and you got excited, because there was always that chance he would do something and you'd just be left there going, what a player.
Yeah. Well, that refinement is exactly the same thing that Fergie managed to do with Ronaldo. You know, he managed to take that and he didn't have the blistering pace or the physique of Ronaldo, but he was a player who knew how to win, and he knew what to do, and he knew how to include his team around him.
Mm-hmm.
So my rebuttal would be to all of this. Well, I love Joe Cole, and I would potentially put him either side. However, when you're talking about a player who went on to score double digits every single season and went on to win as much as he did, went on to become the player that he did, there's no contest, in my opinion. Like, I love Yossi Benayoun. I think he's the ultimate dressing room player, because he speaks 5 languages, and he'd never say boo to a goose. He was always professional. However, he's not getting in the team above Frank Lampard. He was on the team, and you know, he was around Chelsea, he was around Liverpool with players like Gerrard, but let's be honest, he's not getting in the side above them. And
I agree. And I think, as you say, if we're going for this 3, which we are, I don't think you can look past Declan Rice for one. He's just been incredible. Michael Carrick, an insanely good player who is overlooked, even by outgunned by double the number of votes by Mark Noble. No disrespect to Noble, but he's not in the same category as Michael Carrick. And we love Noble. He was a quality player, but if we're being real, Carrick was world class. Absolutely world class, and you could tell that by how long he survived at Man United, for one. And
Carrick gotten into any other national teams, but if you put him in the Germany squad, he would have made it. If you put him in the Brazil squad, he would have made it. He was that good, and you know I say it all the time. My favorite player is Clarence Seedorf, but
you know, I love him as well. Absolutely.
But Carrick as well he's in that same level. He makes it into any generation's side, any modern day football team. Like, you're going to have Jorginho or you're going to have Michael Carrick. It's not a con. Like, Jorginho has won things, Michael Carrick has won things, but the difference is that international level. And Michael Carrick just either didn't get picked or was let down. So
I agree.
For me, he is easily one of the best English centre mids that we've had in the past 50 years. He was fantastic.
Yeah, and I think it's it's only right. We started this piece about the midfielders saying that we've produced over the last 20 odd years probably the best. So let's go with those guys. Now I've got building works going outside.
Yeah. Oh, so
so hang on 1 second. Let's talk about wingers. So we've got our midfield three. We've got our back four. Now it's time to, as this says, do we look for someone to get down the byline and whip in for a centre forward, or do we look for someone who's going to kind of get in, try and sneak in between the lines and score for us? So we've had a number of wingers, I think, over the period. I'm going to let you lead because this is still going on. But we've had a number of wingers. So what do you think about who should be in here and who gets an honourable mention?
Well, let's get one player out of the way who I think there's not even a contest about, and that's just going to be Dimitri Payet. He was absolutely sensational. When we talk about world-class players, we talk about Rio Ferdinand, and we've spoken about Michael Carrick, Frank Lampard, what they went on to become. Payet was world-class when he joined us, and he played at a world-class level while he was with us. And you could argue the only reason that we didn't go on to do something special those few seasons was because of just a lack of investment.
Yeah, and not in that Everton doing him in for 2 months.
Yeah, and he was unplayable. He was absolutely unplayable on his day. Well, I say on his day. His day was every week. Whenever he played, he was unplayable because he's
one of those players that even if he didn't have the best game, sometimes he didn't, he still would walk off the pitch and you go, yeah, he got a couple of assists today. Just didn't matter. You gave him a moment. That's all he needed was a moment. And that's what world-class players do as well. Yeah. They can be non-existent, but the moment you just don't pay attention to them, they are going to do something.
Well, I remember against Bournemouth.
Yeah.
Away.
Oh, what a game.
He was poor for about 60 minutes and suddenly switched it on.
Yeah.
And everything was going through him, everything. And it didn't matter. He was that good. If he just decided to show up for 10 minutes, generally that 10 minutes won you the game. He was the middles.
His debut against Liverpool at Anfield was just, it destroyed him. He got Coutinho sent off for that little pirouette. He was just, I think that was when we all kind of went, oh wow, he is good.
Yeah.
That first period, and I think against Newcastle, he scored that absolute sublime curler into top corner off of a free kick. There's so many points. Sorry, not free kicks, they never play, but there's so many points with the free kicks as well. He had a free kick and we thought of it as like a penalty. That was the insanity of it. The moment he got the ball or there was a free kick, it was just something going to happen.
Well, you got that from the players as well. And that's when you know someone is that good. That's when you know someone is special. It's when even the players are going, you watch this.
I think the best part in that period was against Palace. That free kick obviously was just incredible. But it's the talk from Delaney afterwards where he was saying it was all in that wall. They all thought there's nowhere he's going other in that top corner. If he's going to go, that's where he has to go. They all thought it was covered. As soon as that free kick went, he turned around and shouted, "See ya," because he thought it was going over. And then it went in. So I think it's actually a thing where you see his face, he's just like, because it's that moment of, wow, how has that gone in?
Yeah, he was undeniably the best left winger I think we've had. There's a reason that when it got to January, people were already going, well, someone's going to come in and sign him. Someone's going to come in and sign him. But what more can you say? He wasn't just a show pony either. He wasn't just someone who did that. He helped out. He got stuck in. He was a terrier. He would get back and he would use his body weight, and he was a stocky, strong lad. He would get
I
stuck
think
in.
as well, when he used skill, he entertained, but that skill was functional. I think that's the other thing. A lot of players, they used to step overs to it's just a step over. But when he stepped over the ball, there was an intent to, I'm going to take you this way and then I'm going that way. Everything was a functional use of skill. And I don't think for a while, we'll see the like at West Ham, unfortunately, because quite frankly, we bought a world-class player that no one wanted to touch because of temperament issues. And that was it at the time. It was temperament issues. No one really wanted to touch him. But that was genuinely a world-class player. And as you say, there's no other that we can even talk about that comes near. He is the left wing for this. So now we look at who's going to play on that right-hand side. I guess the question also is, do we maybe bend the rules and maybe look to include one of the centre forwards that we've had, because we've had some very good ones over the years, or do we stick, steadfast and, look at who we've had? And for me, there's only two real standouts for a possible inclusion into this. And obviously it was the man who was on fire last season. And then also the man that is Tricky Trev, the guy who scored that brilliant overhead kick when he's at QPR, but the guy that just pinged that superb diagonal to Di Canio. So I think those for me are the standout wingers during probably our time.
Yeah.
I think my always favourite would always be for Trev, because I absolutely adored him. I thought he was a special player, and I think in today's game he probably would score more goals and would assist more, just in how much space there is now left in that wide position. And I think we forget as well, he was incredibly pacey when he wanted to be. And obviously
he was strong. He's not a slight guy. He was a unit.
To be fair, it was mainly in his arse, but he was a solid dude. But again, I think we'd be remiss not to talk about Bowen, because he has been phenomenal for us since he's signed, especially in the last year. My vote, I think I've toyed over it in the last kind of couple of days. I think I'm going to go for Trev, in all honesty. I think it was a period of football where I really enjoyed West Ham, and he was just incredible for us.
I think Trev is well worth a shout. And he perhaps doesn't quite get the credit he deserves. I know some fans seem to treat him as a bit of a joke, which I don't know if I'm missing out on something there, but he's someone who, whenever I watched him, I thought something's going to happen here. He's going to create something, or he's going to score. And it may not have been to the same degree as Payet, or remotely close, but you knew you could rely on him to do something at least once every game that was going to create a chance or get you a goal. I agree with you in the fact that I think in today's game, he would have got a lot more recognition, because I do think he'd have scored a lot more goals. He'd have scored a lot more goals, and I think the physicality, the pace that he had for today's game on these pitches, with the kind of ability around him, would really kind of just go to that next level. But I think I am perhaps still just going to pick Bowen, in terms of, I think there's just a bit more to come from him. I don't think we've seen the best of Bowen, which sounds like some sort of bullseye best bits show, but he has so much in his locker, but he's showing us much more than I thought he had in his locker as well. Even the overhead kick against Frankfurt, it didn't go in, but I didn't know, I think, he's a great player, and He's going to give you 100%. He's going to run up and down the line. But I didn't really think he had an overhead kick in his locker. He's showing more to his game, and I think his confidence is growing. So for me, I'm going to pick Bowen, if not based just on the this season. He was great last season as well, but even with that kind of slower introduction coming into the side, it was clear Moyes trusted him from the start. Like he knew what he was getting. And I think if next season we can get someone in on that right wing who can kind of push him a bit more. Because let's face it, Yarmolenko, great guy, great human being, and very, very good player on his day. He wasn't pushing Bowen. Let's face it. He might well have helped with some of his training drills and, helping him develop his game. But it's a different thing to have competition in terms of someone pushing you and challenging you for that number one spot. Now, do I think we can get someone who will push Bowen for that number one spot? I think that's maybe debatable. But do I think having someone like a Sarr or a younger kind of player coming through is going to push him? Yeah, I think that could really help us see the very best, that next kind of step up from Bowen. So for me, I think I'm just going to pick Bowen based off what I think he can become.
Yeah, that's fair. I think Trev obviously over a good long period, West Ham did well, got himself in the England squad and so on. But I'm happy to go at Bowen. But also, I think maybe we just park this position because the next position we had players that could probably play across the front line. Not only did we have players play across the line, we had a plethora of players over the past just 10 years alone, about 41 players being signed just for the centre forward position. But also we've had some real talent. And I think that does sum it up. We've had Mavericks, we've had target men, we've had powerhouses, we've had highly technical centre forwards. And I think when we look at our options, it is quite stunning, some of the players that we've had. One of the players that didn't fare so well, and I think, again, it's because of a player that what could have been, I think, in Dean Ashton. What a player he was. Technically brilliant, fantastic finisher, just crippled after that injury. We never got to see the player he could have been. And I genuinely think that he would have been someone reminiscent of, say, Shearer, but probably a little bit more technically about him. And there were even calls at one point of the likes of United starting to take an interest and look at him because of how he was done for us. Obviously, he beat out Carlos Tevez, who, let's face it, what an incredible player that man was. I don't think we can talk about a centre forward without talking about him. Again, we've had another mercurial talent in Marko Arnautovic. Love him or hate him, the moment he was shifted from out wide to centre forward, he was a brilliant player. So we can't take that away from him, regardless of our personal feelings. And then prior to Antonio, we have Paolo Di Canio. And again, this is the other big shock. And in the final vote, in the final poll, Antonio didn't even get there because he was pipped by Arnautovic. So, our all-time goal scorer hasn't even been part of the conversation as part of our fan vote because Marko Arnautovic was preferred as a centre forward. So, there are so many options. There's so many ways we can go. And that's why I said we park the right wing position because, again, Mikel Antonio could go out wide. The likes of Arnautovic could go out wide. You could probably even say I push Carlos Tevez because he did play in a bit of a wider position when he was at Man City. So I think let's just nail down that centre forward position. I know where your vote's going to go. But again, be good to hear who you're going to vote for, who you're pushing for, and why they come above the others.
For me, there are two. There's two who really are not quite head and shoulders, but they're just that level above the rest, and that is Dean Ashton and Carlos Tevez. I think with regards to Di Canio, he's obviously a fantastic player, and he brought you so much kind of pantomime theatre. He brought you something that you wouldn't see on a football pitch. He brought you that sportsmanship that was unparalleled, and he brought you that kind of, I mentioned pantomime because he would literally, oh no, you wouldn't, and like, you know, he could see him play up to things, and I have no doubt he was a fantastic player. Like, there's no doubt about that. But for me, when I was growing up, I think of the talent that Dean Ashton showed. I think about what would work best in a team. And if he'd not had that awful injury, which, you know, I'll never forgive Sean Wright-Phillips for, like, you know, it's just, I'll never forgive him, because he was sensational. And he really would be someone you knew, if he wasn't on the score sheet, he'd be getting an assist, or he'd be causing nightmares. He'd be doing something, whether it was just taking centre backs out of position, whether it was out muscling someone, and even just creating a chance with his body and with his size. He'd be making something happen. Some of the goals he scored as well, he was a fantastic finisher. He could finish in all different type of ways. And I mentioned about Bowen as not really knowing if he had that in his locker and showing us more. But I think there was so much more to come from Dean Ashton. And if you think about him with the prospect of Bowen and Payet either side, that is a terrifying prospect for any defence, because he wasn't just a big man. And I know we shouldn't be surprised by players who are bigger being technically very good, but he was someone who was big, quick, incredibly strong on the ball, and just had it all. I think it was something that, he was the ultimate package really for a footballer. He was unplayable on the day, but to the same degree, so was Tevez. And
I think if you're looking at what we're talking around as a team,
he could do things like link up well with others. He would give you the kind of running that would drag defenders out wide. He would create chances, and he would be able to finish as well. One thing with Tevez that I think people forget is his ability from set pieces. You know, he wasn't just good at free kicks. He was also great in the air, which for his height, I think is quite easy to forget. And when we look at what he went on to do and how the level he went on to perform at, you know, he perhaps didn't have the best attitude, or it was perhaps temperamental, but the results when he was on the pitch, you could never question. He was a fantastic forward, and that's why for me it's between Ashton and it's between Tevez.
Yeah, I think it's fair. Like, obviously, I think Di Canio is probably one that I would have kind of picked for, but when we're looking at this formation, what we've got, I think you have to look at just those two. I would probably say Tevez more, because I think as a free, they would tear teams apart. I genuinely think that they would scare teams. So I think it's probably where we should wrap it up. I think we're going to agree that Tevez probably is the man to lead that strike force. So, bit of a long one today, but again, a lot to talk around. So we're going to say for our goalkeeper, we're going Rob Green as our man. Fullback, we've got Vladimir Sufal and we've got Julian Dix. Centre defence, we've also got Rio Ferdinand and Winston Reid. The best three English midfielders, arguably the best English midfielders to be produced over the last kind of couple of decades. Obviously, there are other players that fall in that category, but within at least the top 5, top 10, you could argue in Michael Carrick sitting in the middle with either side of him. We've got Declan Rice and Fran Lampard. And then left wing, no one else other than Dimitri Payet. Right side, Jared Bowen. And at the tip of our team, we're going to go for Carlos Tevez. So I'm going to say as a captain, I think only Julian Dix can captain that team. For me, I think that's the man. And what we do is we'll post the team out after the show as well. But if you're not following us, please do follow on Babylon Irons. Obviously, please like and subscribe. It's been a long one today, so appreciate everyone sticking through it. But one last thing to say, as ever, and that is, come on, you Irons.